Hey guys, and welcome to Kunai. It's me, Bish, and I am joined with Will.
Hello, hello.
Will, you know what, Will? That was the same intro that Jordan Cruz gave on yesterday when he was on the podcast.
Well, that's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Have you been speaking with him?
Total coincidence. No, I have not. I have not had the pleasure.
You know what? You should. He's an awesome guy. And speaking of Jordan Cruz, he's in the film that we're going to be talking about today. And you might be thinking, Bish, film? What is this about? I thought Kunai was for anime. Yes, it is. Kunai is for anime, but we're testing out a new show format on Kunai, which is basically focusing on anime films. And the reason why we're doing that is, just so we can get more content out for you guys. We're still going to have the same regular Kunai episodes, and they're still going to come out at the regular scheduled time, but this is just additional content for you guys. And there's a lot of anime films out there that we want to talk about, and unfortunately, because of how Kunai was in the past, we weren't able to do it. We did try it in the past, but we were new to podcasting or new to anime, and so it didn't work well. So now that we've got a more solidified Kunai show format, we're testing this out, and hopefully this works. And tell us what you guys think as well. If you like this new style of Kunai with anime films, please tell us and give us some suggestions. But that being said, for you new folks, Get Alive Podcast Kunai is a monthly anime discussion podcast under the Get Alive group. Due to the nature of discussion, we can't avoid spoilers of the show to be discussed. For those shows that are based on an existing piece of work, whether it's manga, light novel, or some other media form, we're not going to be covering the source material for those. If you'd like to recommend a show for us to watch and make an episode on Kunai, leave us a suggestion on our Discord. And big thanks to our sponsors, Japan Crate and Crunchyroll. I also want to thank Sony Pictures Entertainment and Funimation UK for providing us with an early access preview for the film. Did I mention the name of the film, Will? Did I say what the name was?
Not yet.
I haven't. Okay, so I've been talking about this film and I haven't even mentioned it. The name of the film, it is called Sing a Bit of Harmony. That is the English name for the film. I can't remember what the Japanese name was, and I'm not even going to try pronouncing it. Yeah, Sing a Bit of Harmony tells the story of the beautiful and mysterious Shion, who transfers to Keibu High School, where she quickly becomes popular for her open-hearted personality and exceptional talents. But she turns out to be an AI in the testing phase. Shion's goal is to bring the oh my god, this is Funimation's press release, by the way. The chronic loner Satomi happiness, but the strategy is something no human would expect.
I mean, to be fair, that's a pretty good description.
It is a pretty, it's a pretty good description, but chronic loner, that's pretty harsh. They're basically calling Satomi a loser. I feel bad reading that. The synopsis from Funimation was interesting, but basically what this film is about, it's about a high school students, Satomi, who's basically just going through high school life, and her mum works for this electronics company that develops AI, and her mum has developed an AI and is testing them at the school without the school's knowledge, which is kind of scary and kind of crazy in that sense. The film is actually co-produced by Funimation. I'd imagine that they're on the production committee of some sort, as well as JC Staff. If you guys know Kunai, if you guys know me, you'd know that JC Staff is one of my favorite animation studios. They've done Golden Time, they've done Toradora, which is my favorite anime. So going into this, I was really excited just from JC Staff alone. And it runs for 109 minutes. That was also on the press release. So, Will.
It was longer than that, though.
Is it?
Yeah. When I watched it, it ran for 148 minutes, but 12 minutes of that's credits.
Is it 148 minutes or 1 hour 48?
I'm sorry.
Minutes?
It was 1 hour 48 minutes. I'm sorry. You're right. That's it. Oh my gosh, I'm stupid.
Yeah, I'm glad you know, which works out to be 109 minutes.
Oh, Will, yeah, I know. I just did the math in my head. Okay, I'm sorry.
Will, and you're a teacher.
Yes.
You can't do basic math. No, don't say, I'm an English teacher.
No.
Blah, blah, blah. No.
Yeah, exactly. And math is my worst subject when I was a student, so...
Well, this is not a good excuse, okay? I don't accept that.
I have no excuses.
Pity
me.
Yes, exactly. What was your first impressions? Because obviously, we're both new to this film. I didn't know much about it, but I have a little bit more of a story. But what was your first impressions when I told you to watch it? Because this film aired in Japan in October, October. Were you aware of the film as it was getting its theatrical release in Japan?
Yes, I was aware of it, but it was one of those things where it was like out of sight, out of mind. I didn't remember the movie being a thing in Japan until we were talking earlier today, and reminding me to watch it and how to and all that kind of stuff. But I definitely remember seeing the posters, around in various stores, malls, near actual movie theaters, things like that. But, other than that, I didn't really notice too much about it until going and actually watching it today. So I don't really know how it was marketed, even here in Japan. But yeah, up until watching it today, I don't remember seeing or hearing much about it beforehand.
Which is kind of interesting because the press in the UK, and I mean even in Europe, Jacob was telling me that only yesterday that there was some people on German TV, and bear in mind he lives in Austria, so there are people on German TV like interviewing the German voice actors on German national television. So I have a feeling that it's probably going to be a lot bigger in the Western world compared to Japan.
And I find it kind of funny too, because typically if there is like a big anime production movie, the theater that's actually just down the road from me, it's like about 40 minutes to get there by train, typically get whenever there's a big movie. And I do remember when I was in that mall that there were posters for it, so I'm sure they did get it. But usually I at least hear chatter from like my students and stuff like that, because where I live is actually a really big kind of manga and anime hotbed. So like the town that I live in is where Gegege no Kitaro comes from.
Oh, okay.
And I'm only a few train stops away from where Detective Conan comes from. So a lot of the young people around here, like manga and anime is actually a big part of their culture. They all are talking about it all the time. Like the kids at my school are always borrowing each other's books and manga, and like in between classes, like they get on their Chromebooks and they're watching stuff about anime. Like they love, of course, things like Kimetsu no Yaiba here and Haikyuu, etc. So I was really surprised that this was just kind of a low-key release even around where I am.
I'm surprised by that because it's even won like awards in like film festival awards in Japan and even in the UK, because there's Scotland Loves Anime, which is basically I don't know how to explain it, but it's like a film festival that is sort of taking place across a few cinemas in Scotland, and all they do is just air the films and people go and watch it. And a lot of the time, yes, you do get anime fans coming to watch these anime films, but a lot of the time you might see like elderly couples or like just regular non-anime fans just coming in, seeing what's in the cinema, going to watch it. And it's quite interesting because I have a feeling that a lot of people going to watch this film, obviously they won't know much about it other than what's being promoted because it is an original story, but at the same time I have a feeling that you're going to get a lot of people that aren't anime fans coming to watch this film, and probably this might be their first exposure or an early exposure to anime.
This might come off sounding kind of strange. Clearly by just looking at this movie you can definitely tell it's an anime, but not just because of like the music involvement in it, but just like the pacing, the tone, something about it feels very almost like Disney-esque about it. Like if you were to say like a Disney co-produced anime production, I'd be like, okay, I can see it.
I do get that vibe, and we'll talk about it later on. But in terms of my first impressions, obviously I only knew about this because I got an email from Funimation. I want to give them a shout out because they're really cool. So I've been speaking to Paula from Funimation Press because they're really cool people, and the only reason I knew about this is because they reached out to me. They were like, Bish, does this interest you? And I was like, what? I've never had press teams actually go out of their way to figure out what I like and just send me emails and say, is this of interest to you? Would you want to produce press coverage for it? And I looked at it and I was like, oh, you know what? I didn't even know it was a JC Staff anime at this point. I looked at the art design and I was like, well, it seems pretty decent, but I don't know what it's about. And I saw the name Sing a Bit of Harmony and I was like, is this gonna be like Your Lie in April, or like those anime where there's a lot of singing? I always find that those animes just they're gonna be depressing. That's just my opinion. I just find that when there's an anime that has a lot of singing, it's expected to be depressing. So I was like, okay, I'm not really that interested in it. I got that press release in August and I sort of laid down a little bit. I wasn't really paying attention to it because the film hadn't come out in Japan yet. And then after it come out in Japan, I got another email from Funimation saying, this is the cast list podcast and I saw Jordan Dash Cruz. I was like, oh my god, he's been on the podcast. He's such a cool guy. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna arrange a recording with them, and I'm gonna go and say to Funimation, hey, we did a recording with Jordan, and we want to, produce some really awesome press coverage for the film. They were like, that's awesome, and they gave obviously me a viewing link or whatever. And it's pretty weird watching anime before it releases, if that makes sense. I felt a bit awkward because it was normally when you watch anime, you get that sort of reaction from Twitter. There's people live tweeting, there's people like, oh my god, this is amazing, this is episode 1, this is blah blah blah, and you get to enjoy in that conversation. But when it's just you and your team, I don't even know if you were going to be able to view this, so it might have just been me, you know what I mean? So when you have that sort of responsibility on you, you can't discuss with anyone about it. It gets a bit lonely, if that makes sense. And that's not the experience that I like in having, if that makes sense, when I'm going in and watching anime. Especially with anime films, I like going and watching it in cinemas because you're in the room with the same sort of people. People are only there because they like anime, right? So they're gonna react in a certain way when something happens. There's more of a vibe to it.
Not just anime, but anything at a movie theater. It's its own experience, That's why we go to the movies even to this day. And this is why, anytime there's like a new big movie, why it always just blows up, because you're just experiencing it with all those people at the same time. And it's the same thing as why we always, when we talk about anime, one of the more common terms that we tend to talk about anyway is the anime community, because we all part of the same community. This is why we talk about it all the time. It's why we're always on Twitter and message boards and forums and all that type of stuff. Whether we agree or not, it is still a community that we're all a part of. So I can understand that whole thing about it. It's like, it would be really weird for me just to see this not only early but alone.
Yeah, and I think for me as well is the fact that I know if COVID wasn't a thing, we'd all be probably invited to like a press screening with other members of the press, right? So that may have been a different sort of experience, or we may have gone and watched it with some other anime journalists or early screening with fans and stuff like that. But because having to watch it in isolation, it's a different experience, and I think it adds to the first impressions as well, because I wasn't getting my normal cinema experience, right? Because when I go to the theaters, when I go to the movies, I was saying this with Jordan on the previous episode, but when I go to the cinema, I like to buy snacks, right? I like my nachos, I get like a slushie, I get a bag of M&Ms and some popcorn. I pig out, right? I have to get everything at the cinema. It's not only that, it's also the fact that when you go to the cinema, right, you can sneak in snacks. I don't know if that's a thing, because
what?
Like
this is the first I'm hearing of this.
No, dude, you know what I mean, because like in American TV.
No, I don't know what you mean.
Yes, you know.
I have no idea what you're talking
American,
about.
You know what I'm talking
Sneaking snacks into a movie theater. My gosh, you criminal.
You know
what?
I
can't believe this. I'm going to report you.
You can report me, because it's not illegal in the UK. There's nothing in the terms of service, because when you're watching American TV and you're sort of conditioned not to bring snacks into a movie theater because it's like, oh, it's illegal, they'll kick you out, or they'll do this or do that. But there's nothing in the terms of service in the UK, at least for the cinemas that I go to. Nothing prevents you from bringing in your own snacks or your own drinks or whatever, but I still like to sneak them in because I feel as though like I'm a spy. Look, I'll go to Costco
like
and I'll
you're
bring
like in MI5.
Yeah, that kind of thing, like MI5, like James Bond, you know what I mean? 007. Like, I'll bring in my snacks. I'll go to Costco because the cinema that I go to is conveniently placed because it's in Wembley Stadium, right? Well, it's near Wembley Stadium, so Costco is near there as well. So I'll go to Costco. I'll buy myself a hot dog from Costco. I'll buy myself a soda from Costco. And then I'll bring, because you can buy bags of popcorn from Costco as well. So I'll buy a bag of popcorn. I'll buy like, what else? I would buy like tortilla chips and like nacho cheese and some jalapenos. I'll bring them with me. Or I'll buy some M&Ms and that kind of stuff, because cinema food is so expensive for no reason.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably where they make their money, I guess.
Because most of the ticket sales actually goes back to the distributors of the movie itself. The theaters only get a small take of the ticket sales, so they make it up in the snack bar.
Yeah, which is unfortunate, but I mean, I will always get one thing at the cinema though, slushie. I'll always get a slushie, because it's like, you guys probably, I don't know if you have them in the US, like slushies at the...
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, there's all kinds of different, names for them and brands and things like that. So obviously, like in America, probably like the most popular, well-known one is from 7-Eleven. You can get Slurpees.
Yeah, but I mean, do you get them at the cinema?
Oh yeah. I mean, I used to work at a movie theater a long time ago, and we had them. Yeah.
Oh, okay,
definitely.
Because I mean, in the UK, you only get like this. It's a company called Tango, which is basically they make drinks that are like, it's basically Pepsi's equivalent of Fanta, but they do like special flavors for the slushies, like blueberry, raspberry, and like lemon lime. Like I'm like, oh my god, this is crazy! And I always get like the biggest size. Anyway, I know that's a bit weird, but it's just my point being is that I felt as though I was robbed of that experience.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's weird because I'm really old-fashioned when it comes to movie theater stuff. I just like a nice Coke and a big old thing of popcorn. Only light butter though. I don't like a whole lot of butter.
This is the thing I never understood. But that butter sauce is disgusting. Like, I've seen it. Like, butter shouldn't be coming out of a pump. That's one thing. And it feels like, I don't know, it reminds me of that gross butter dip from Papa John's.
Oh, the garlic sauce. I actually like that stuff. I know what you're talking about.
Well, okay, you disappoint me.
Hey man, you gotta understand. I'm a Southern boy. We'll put butter in anything.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
you can go to state fairs and get deep fried butter.
Oh my, okay, that's disgusting. But all right,
yeah.
Do they have butter popcorn in Japan? Like, have you been to a movie theater?
Oh yeah, dude. I love going to the movie theater. That's what I was gonna say earlier. Is that of like COVID and all this stuff. Like, if it wasn't for that, I love going to the movies regardless. Like, I'm the type of person, I'll go to at least a movie a month, if not twice a month type thing. But now because of COVID, like I think the last movie I went to go see was I think it was Godzilla vs. Kong. I think that was the last one I went to go see. So, and then before that, I think the last one I saw was the last Detective Conan movie.
So when you're watching films in Japan, it's all in Japanese, right?
It depends on the movie, but like if it comes from like America, then it'll be English with Japanese subtitles. Yeah.
But what about because
Exactly.
you mentioned Detective Conan? Like, was you watching that in Japanese without?
I was watching it. No, I was just straight watching it raw. But it's one of those things. Like, I mean, everyone knows Detective Conan, and once you've watched it enough or read it enough, you can still kind of pick up what's going on. And like, and also it's anime that's still meant for kids, so the dialogue itself is usually not as rushed, if that makes sense.
Makes sense.
So like I said, I can pick up enough from my limited Japanese to still kind of get the gist of it. And I wanted to do it for the experience anyway.
I will say this from now, that when the film releases, because it releases next week, so by the time this episode goes out, the film probably would have ended its theatrical release. So next week, I'm probably going to, because I had my booster jab today, because you got to stay safe. So I had my booster jab specifically because I do want to go out and watch this film in the theaters, because like I said, I feel that I was robbed of that experience. Like, I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to view it early, but it's different when you get to go and be with a bunch of people. And I think this is a type of film that I feel that a lot of people will enjoy, because there's so many favorite episodes and moments for me. Do you feel that there are any moments
episodes?
Oh, sorry. Apologies.
You just made favorite moments.
Favorite moments. Do you feel that there's any favorite moments for you within this film?
Absolutely. I had to actually go back and watch it because I liked it so much. That was the judo dance.
Yes! Oh my god, okay, judo dance. You know what else I liked? I liked all the scenes where you have Shion coming in to resolve people's situations, because she resolves it in such a way that is unique to that character, right? If it was in the case of Thunder with the judo dancing scene. And there's always a musical accompaniment to it as well. So there's always her singing at the same time, which is... it's quite nice and it's quite quaint. Like, even the bit with Aya, that fight that she was having with her boyfriend. And then she just sings and it sort of diffuses the situation. They're saying what they need to say without saying it. And I think Shion picks up on that and she sort of does it for them, if that makes sense. She helps them to grow. And those were my favorite, sort of moments in the movie, because it's like you get to see people progress as characters. And obviously they're progressing quite quickly because you only have 2 hours of screen time or an hour hour and a half in this case. So you have to sort of pace it quite differently, and you have to make sure characters' issues get resolved within that hour and a half, because you can't rely on, oh, you know what, it's 24 episodes or whatever. You know what I mean?
But it's not just that it's, only like an hour and a half long movie, but also that the story takes place primarily over the course of like 5 days.
It takes course over 5 days, but it's structured in such a way where, is it truly believable? Do you know what I mean? Like, I get it, it's structured over 5 days, but these are people that really didn't speak to each other much at the beginning of the week.
I think that's part of how the actual kind of story and plot grow along. As it kind of peels back those layers, you come to find out that all these characters, not counting Shion, but, the other boys and girls, that they all kind of came up together. They've all known each other for years. They've all actually had their eyes on each other in one way or one form. They've all paid attention to each other. They just haven't kind of congealed in a while. Like there's some that, that they were friends once, but they hadn't spoken in years. Other just in passing. They just happen to be in the same class together. Like I said, Shion just kind of becomes the glue to fix them.
Yeah.
So like kind of just even going with the name of the movie itself, think of that word harmony itself. Harmony means balance, basically. So I think this whole thing of saying singing harmony, it was about bringing their friendships back together and striking a balance within their lives. And like you notice, as they kind of got back to being friends again, how it was making their lives more enjoyable, and how they're becoming more happy, and how they've potentially gone on to maybe even have better lives in the future. And that whole theme of happiness keeps coming up repeatedly, mostly from Shion just asking, Satomi, like every time she like sees her new in the day or whatever time it is, she's like, are you happy? Are you happy?
The way Shion is as a character, yes, she is an AI and her goal is to serve orders, right? It's the fact that she truly cares about everyone. I have a feeling that her main order was to make Satomi happy, right? But in doing so, she's making everyone else happy.
Exactly.
Because they even say it in the film, because I believe Satomi says, you make me happy, right? So it's like there's this realization that Shion is more than just a robot. She is a part of the friend group. She is, for all intents and purposes, a human being. And it's very interesting because in a lot of Western media, or even in films in general, if we're talking about old school shows like Knight Rider, right, where you have Kit, the car, or you have 2001 A Space Odyssey, where you have HAL, or even iRobot, right? AI and like artificial intelligence aren't always portrayed in the best fashion, There's always this trope that they start out good and they're helping out humanity, and the next thing they're just killing people.
I was kind of making some of the similar, kind of mental notes, because we kind of joke about it even now with things that are going on with AI in the real world now, and people are memeing and joking all the time, and like, oh, here comes the rise of the machines and all that kind of stuff. But that's one thing that I noticed right off the bat too with this movie. It's like within the first couple scenes, it's clearly shown how in this world of this anime that AI has kind of just naturally been embedded into society.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if this is supposed to be like near future Japan, alternate reality Japan, because where the movie's actually set is on a small island just off the mainland of, Kyushu here in Japan, which it is actually kind of like, even though it has, a nice city and stuff like that, it is kind of, I don't want to say isolated, but it's its own kind of little world just off of Japan. So, and I think it was kind of a good choice for a setting for this as well. But like I said, in their town, AI is just integrated into everything by this one main company there, this Hoshima, Electronics and Hoshima Labs. But it's integrated into a way where it's not, what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, there's no interference.
Yeah, there's no interference. It's like you see the solar farm and the wind farm off the course of the beach and in the ocean. It's like, okay, okay, that you can kind of see. But like even like the little garbage robots going around, they don't really get in the way. You've got the bus driving robot where the bus itself is an AI. You know, they have the specific paths for the AI. Everything just flows naturally, you know, and even like how it was still a traditional old Japanese style home in town where everybody was. They still had like the AI built into like the doors and the TV. So it was futuristic, but not overly futuristic.
Yes.
Like even when they were using their computers, it still looked like a computer that we could recognize now, but we could tell still fit into that era of being, you know, modernized or, you know, maybe in the near future.
This is quite interesting because it's something that I noted on as well, because like I mentioned, if you're looking at the older stuff, you know, whether we're looking at the Jetsons or, you know, like I said, Knight Rider, or even with iRobot, a film and media always portray the future to be this amazing, crazy thing and have to go all out with design and stuff like that. And even if you look at like Disney's Home of the Future, right? Everything is sort of automated. But when I saw this, I didn't feel as though it was out of place, because you get a lot of anime that's set in the future. Like even if you look at something like Plastic Memories, which it has something like the AI theme is quite similar to it, but Plastic Memories, the cars are designed differently, the phones are like little holograms and stuff like that, and it's like way into the future, if that makes sense. Like even the bikes, the motorcycles look like, you know, mopeds that you could buy today. It's just they've got AI integrated locks. Or the buses don't look any different than normal buses that you get today. Or as you mentioned, the traditional Japanese house that Satomi lives in, the only thing it is that she's got like the AI that lock the doors, right? Or her little, I kind of compare it to like an Amazon or a Google Home Assistant. It's basically like that, and that's technology that we have already, right? With smart home technology, we already have like, hey, turn off my lights, hey, lock my doors. You can already do that, but it's sort of gotten to a point where I feel as though this would be the more logical step, if that makes sense. It's not far off what we have at the moment, and I feel that that setting is quite relatable. So even when I saw the characters, it's not like, oh, these are just characters living in the future, they've got their future problems, but you don't really see. And I think another thing is that they've also given solutions, because everyone sort of nowadays, in terms of, because I know I'm dipping into themes a bit here, but in terms of AI, people are very afraid, because they're like, well, what if an AI starts thinking for itself and goes on a killing rampage and does all of this kind of stuff? But the anime, which is weird because it's an anime giving you the solution, right? The anime has a failsafe there. You know, people can bring out their phones and just emergency shut down the device, and only a human can override it. They've even given solutions to the many problems people sort of find with AI, and I think even the depiction of the AI in the show, they're friendly robots. Like even the bit at the end, right, where Shion sort of takes control of all the robots and stuff like that, she doesn't get them to attack. She gets them to do like wonderful dances and like just to distract the people, if that makes sense. So she doesn't even use them as a form of aggression. Even when she was speaking to the Sandayu, the Thunder's training robot, she just went up to him and she was like, hey, actually, you know, I communicated with him and I told him to pretend to do an attack, if that makes sense. It's not like Sandayu was programmed, you need to kill and beat the shit out of these people. It was more so a theatrical thing. So it's not like the AI wanted to go and hurt people.
She also referred to basically all the other AI things that she interacted with as her friends.
Yes.
She was like, oh, my friends the cameras were helping me. You know, my friend the security system, my friend the judo robot, etc. Like she called everyone her friend.
And I think also because it's the fact that she can relate to them, and because she's not just only in her body, she's communicating with things over the network, right? So it's easy for her to, you know, speak to the cameras and say, hey, can you just delete my stuff if that's possible? Thanks, you know, stuff like that. And I think it's quite interesting because it allows for certain things to happen in the anime that normally you wouldn't be able to do. Like for example, when I saw the fact that, you know, her stuff was getting edited out, originally I thought it was Satomi's mom was seeing this and she was like, I gotta cut this out because it might ruin the experiment. So I thought originally it was actually a human intervention, but the fact that Shion is actually communicating with the other AI to hide herself because she knows what might happen if she does get caught out. I thought that was interesting.
Well, and I think, you know, how this whole theme of AI robots, however you want to say it, being integrated into society. And then, like, if you notice, there was also the theme about how we as people use and treat AI, where it's like these kids, they actually ended up like wanting to be friends with Shion, treating her like a real girl. I mean, even though they all knew she was AI and everything, they still felt like she was their friend too.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because not all of the humans were like that, because you see in, I think,
exactly
in the first scene of the film, where those jerks were basically like taping the bin and stuff like that.
You beat me to it. Where I was like, I said, yes, there were some people though that don't treat AI in that way. So like I said, you got to see both sides of it. Well, even in the lab itself, you know, where the other, you know, scientist that was there with Satomi's mom, where he was talking about like, you know, wiping the memory, you know, back before it was even Shion, you know, when it was on the little Tamagotchi thing, or like how the other guy that was like the head of their department, their program, I can't remember his name now.
The director, or the guy that's like just the head of the department, the guy in the suit?
Not the guy that came in on the helicopter,
okay.
But the other one.
That guy was such a dick, man. Like,
I think it was like Saijo or something like that. Anyway, how like they were planning on just how they could use this AI to just, you know, further grow the business if this whole experiment had succeeded. Like, you know, that they're like, you know, it's just a machine, it's our property. You know, they didn't view her as being a her, you know, or being a being.
I'll be honest with you, because I don't think their goal was to sort of use Shion as like a commercial product. Like they were saying, yes, she is our property, so we have the right to shut her down. But I think what it was sort of done as sabotage to prevent Satomi's mom to progress in the business, because it's clearly stated that, you know, women in that industry don't progress, and it's a very male focused industry, and they, you know, they're quite misogynistic and that kind of stuff. So it feels to me like, especially that the guy, like the other technician, I think he's like 5 years her senior, so in his mind he's probably thinking, oh my god, this is just really like, she's younger than me and she's going further with her career. And I think that might be another reason why he wanted to wipe that Tamagotchi to begin with, and first of all to kind of prevent her from progressing, because he probably knew that, oh my god, this is fucking amazing, and I'm pretty sure if he had the idea for it, he would have taken it and become a big boss, you know.
And it's because of, you know, Satomi's mom is the one that wrote the AI programs in the Tamagotchi. And then this kid who's, you know, like a genius at 8 years old is able to take that AI and make it grow and even more. And he's like, that was even possible? He's like, and you made this, right?
It's sort of driven by jealousy, because it's like that guy clearly wanted to sabotage her initially with the Tamagotchi thing. And then when she sort of surpassed, obviously he didn't sort of make the link that Shion is based off that Tamagotchi, right? But he still has this resentment to Satomi's mother, because obviously she's going up and up and up in the company, and they're trying to figure out a way to sort of stunt her growth in the company, because if the chairman sees it and he sees it as a success, then probably she might get a promotion.
As far as like the whole thing about AI integrating into society and potentially being more than just a thing, it's kind of funny, because when I was looking into like some of the staff, you know, who worked on this and everything, I noticed the person who was the actual original creator of this was Yasuhiro Yoshida, which I've only actually ever watched one of his other movies, which I didn't watch it when it came out, obviously. I want to say I watched it maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, called Eve no Jikan, which it's set in almost the same type of world, where they're these AI people basically, but they're like the workers of the world. Like they'll work at like a coffee shop, or they'll work as a taxi driver, stuff like that. But in that world, they're looked at like as lower class citizens. Like if you talk to them and you treat them like they're human, you're kind of looked at funny. So I think it kind of goes along with the theme of that. That's why it almost feels like it could potentially even be the same world as this movie.
It could be the case, because I've noticed certain authors and directors sort of like to link things up, even if it is you know, different studios and whatnot. So part of me thinks that it is obviously a very interesting topic. It's very relevant in this modern age, but I think the reaction reactions of the characters themselves, I don't know if anyone, at least nowadays, would have this reaction, right? If you had an AI in front of you and it was speaking and you couldn't distinguish it from a human being, because with Shion, it's very difficult to tell. You know, it's pretty obvious because even in the film, people felt that Shion was human.
They just thought she was really weird.
Yeah.
That's like I messaged you, you know, when I was watching the movie, I'm like, this is one odd movie because I didn't get why she was acting the way she was.
You don't get it until the very end of the film.
So like the very first real scene with her, not the first scene, but the first real scene where we got to see Shion the person, and the first thing she does is she's like, instead of doing her class introduction, she walks straight up to Satomi, stands in front of her. She's like, Satomi, are you happy? And she's like, what? How do you know my name?
Yeah, and that's what freaked me out a bit. And I thought maybe it might be that the mum, knowing that she goes to the same school as her daughter, probably programmed that function in so that she knows who she is.
That's what I was thinking at first too.
And
I was like,
it's a big curveball. Because it's like, you only find out at the end that Shion was looking out for her from the very beginning, and this was actually Toma's AI or modified AI. And it's the fact that it's his command, because he said, I want Satomi to be happy.
She'd literally been watching over her for almost 10 years.
Yeah, it's insane.
She just didn't even know it.
And the funny thing is, if you could take that easily and make that like some sci-fi horror very quickly, you could do that. But the fact that it's not, that's what really impressed me.
She was doing it in a caring way, and that's why like it didn't dawn on me until the revelation of her actually coming from that original Tamagotchi AI. You remember the part where Aya was pissed and they were talking in the music room, and she was like, did you, talking to Satomi, she's like, did you order Shion to kiss Gachan? And she was like, no, I didn't do that. She's like, well, she had to do it. She can only do things by being ordered.
Exactly.
And then Shion even says, I only do things by being ordered. But this is the whole thing. It still went back to the original order of Toma telling Shion to make Satomi happy. So she was following that same order from day one through the entire series of events.
You know, after she quote unquote dies, she still does that. But it's quite interesting because like initially the film leads you down a path and it makes you feel as though the mum is the one that's making the shots and everything, because you'll see flashback scenes of, you know, the mum and who I presume to be her ex-husband, and obviously living in that household and living as a single parent and having a child. It's incredibly difficult, and I understand that's probably why Satomi is such a big fan of this sort of princess sort of Disney films and that kind of stuff. And I think it might have been a mechanism for her parents' divorce, you know, because a lot of kids sort of go through that. You know, if their parents are getting divorced, they'll find something, or if there's a lot of childhood trauma in their life, right, they'll find something to hang on to, cling on to, and in a way obsess over it. I mean, for me, when my father died, it was gaming, right? I would just focus on games and that kind of stuff, and it's different for different children. But it is quite interesting because she was growing up and she didn't have a friend. I mean, she did have Toma, but Toma obviously left because he felt maybe he'd done something wrong, because he saw the conversation that happened with the mum. So it's like so many things weren't being added up, and you have this sort of idea, at least for me, that Satomi's mum is kind of like the bad guy in a way. Like, I don't know, that's the kind of feeling that I had, because she was like, who made this? And I was like, oh, is she saying this as in who made this? Like, why are you getting involved in like AI? This is dangerous thing.
I never got that she was the bad guy, but I thought it was just one of those things of like how adults always misunderstand children.
But the thing is, she didn't misunderstand because she was proud of it and she wanted to know who done it so that she can show it off at work. Do you know what I mean?
I don't mean misunderstanding him. I just misunderstanding the situation.
Because it was interesting for me, because like even later on when the mum's drinking and she's at rock bottom because she knows I don't have a job anymore, right? And I've lost my life's work. I felt really bad. I was like, the mum is really aggressive, and it scared me a little bit, like genuinely, because it's like you don't want to see your parents in that way. Like most children don't want to see their parents when they're at their rock bottom, and you know what I mean? It's not a nice thing to see. It does humanize them, don't get me wrong, because obviously we are human beings. We dip emotionally and in terms of our mental health, but the fact that the mum was like really aggressive caught me off guard.
But again, going back to how, like, you know, we even both like we're talking about how they bring up in the movie about her working in a predominantly male-driven place, and how like the men at these labs basically try to hold the women back and down, and you know, to work twice as hard. So that was still kind of like her mindset of like, and that's why she wasn't, you know, coming home till 3 o'clock in the morning, and you know, why she was going into work first thing in the morning at the same time that her daughter was leaving for school, things like that. So she was just, I don't want to say overworked, that wasn't the cause of it, but she was just trying so hard to make headway and keep moving up within the company, that when something came out to where all of a sudden it's like all of her work was washed away, I can't blame her for being upset. And that's why she even told Satomi, she was like, you know, you need to go on to your room before I say or do something that, you know, I don't mean to say or do.
Part of me thinks that she got over it really quickly.
It still showed throughout the movie that she still deeply cared for her daughter. She wasn't like the evil mom or anything like that. She was just so focused on her job. And Satomi actually looked out for her too. It was not just because of being mother and daughter, but they both took care of each other in their own ways.
I mean, their relationship is quite interesting. It's almost as though they're sisters in a way.
Yeah, very much. Very much.
One thing that I thought was funny was like towards the end where she's like, oh mom, you know what, I'm gonna buy a new skirt, and then the mom was like, well, buy one that we can both wear, you know.
And she was like, not again.
Yeah, it's that kind of lifestyle, because obviously I think they're living together, and obviously, you know, she does care for her as her daughter, but at the same time it's like she's still a young woman, you know, like I just feel that she's more of an older sister type as opposed to a mum. She doesn't really have the Okasan mum vibe that you normally get in anime, if that makes sense.
I just want to touch on like just when I started up the movie in the first place, just I loved the whole like opening cinematic, like that, and that's what kind of kicked my brain off into even thinking that it was very Disney-esque. It kind of had that whole feeling at the start.
You know what I thought that cinematic was? I didn't realize that it was part of the film. You know how like in front of those anime films you get like JC Staff and Funimation? I thought that this was like a splash screen for Funimation.
At first that's what I was thinking too, but as it was like going along, I'm like, no, this is part of the movie. This is going into something like in it, like you could see snippets of like the city and memories and like, you know, things that looked like it could be part of the internet, you know, and I was like, okay, this is going right on into the movie. And then I love how they even tied it in later into the movie.
Yes,
I'm
at
like,
the end.
oh, that's what this was. So, but like I said, that first impression was, I was like, man, this already feels like very Disney-esque. And then like when they heard some of the musical cues too, I'm like, wait, I know this is gonna have music involved. I was like, but is this an actual musical? And it kind of is, but not in that grating kind of annoying way.
This is the thing that I was mentioning to Jordan yesterday. I was saying, well, it's a musical because there are musical breaks and there are cues, but it's not like, it doesn't feel cheesy, you know, like
not only does it not feel cheesy, but it doesn't drag stuff on. It's not like they're inserting a full like 4-minute music video into the middle of a movie. Like, I know this is going to be kind of blasphemous for me saying this as someone who was in like drama club and took drama when I was in school, but I've never been a huge fan of musicals where like the music and the music numbers are the centerpiece of the shows. In this, it was that opposite. The musical parts and the singing parts were, I mean, some of them were a spectacle, but it's like it didn't overpower the rest of the movie. It wasn't something like High School Musical where it's like every time a conflict arose or a new character came in, they had to sing a song for 4 minutes about it. You know what I mean?
You do say that, but the conflict a lot of the time, whether it's internal struggles or in terms of romance or whatever, those conflicts are resolved through music and through song, but it's done in such a relaxed way. It's very integrated. It's not jarring.
That's exactly where I was going with it. It was very integrated into the overall plot, and I think it made perfect sense too with using Shion in that way, with her basically kind of having control, and not really control, but using her other AI friends to use like the PA systems and lighting systems and things like that. I'm like, okay, that makes sense.
And it's not just that, it's just the fact that when Shion was activated for the first time, she started to sing.
She was singing the song from the movie that
exactly
that
like that sort of Disney-esque movie. And it's very interesting because even when you go through her memories, there are clips of the movie in her peripheral vision. So she's always referring to it and she's always looking at it to find solutions, right? Because she remembers the whole prince situation, you know, finding a prince, because that was in the film that, you know, Satomi used to watch as a kid. So she was trying to find Satomi a prince, right? It's those sort of solutions I thought was quite interesting. And even the dancing scene with Sandayu, right? When she took over Sandayu's code and she started doing the, you know, the judo, right? She was referring to the ballroom scenes in that film, right? So it's very interesting, but you don't tend to realize this until the end. And I think it's done in a very, very smart way, because I did not understand most of this film until it's revealed to you. And if this was like a 24 episode or even a 12 episode anime, I would be very annoyed by this. But because it's a film, you're expected, I think there's different rules for films and for like series, but you're kind of expected to get that punchline. You're kind of expected to get it revealed to you. And it always has to be in a sort of fantastical way. It can't be anticlimactic.
And I want to also touch back on that whole, I guess you can call it a theme, but the whole process of memories themselves, as it's revealed how she has all these, you know, memories that she's kept while watching Satomi for these, you know, whatever, 9-10 years. It's like, I don't know if you noticed it like I did, but when they were showing like the data in the research laboratory and it was showing like her memory clusters and how it was kind of like these huge clusters that were kind of separated by smaller gaps from things from when she was, you know, just the AI watching over Satomi in the childhood to coming into now her having this AI robotic body and now creating all these new memories, and how they even said that she was creating memories at such a fast rate and things like that. But then not only from this whole AI aspect of it, but how memories played a huge role in the overall theme of it, from, you know, Satomi having the memory of Toma being her friend when they were young and still clinging on to that now bad memory that kind of influenced the future. Then you also had them when they were getting their little victory party and taking pictures, and they said, well, we're creating memories, and Shion was like, well, I remember everything that I want to anyway. And they're like, that's not the point, it's the act of going through with this. Like I said, so memories also played a huge part throughout all the subtext of the entire story.
You know what else I enjoyed about the story, before we get more into the characters, was the way that the film sort of gives you little hints at the beginning that these are important things. Like, for example, as soon as you go into the electronics club room, there's a massive sign that says no smoking. And it's like, you'd think at the beginning when I saw that, because it popped out at me and I was like, it's a school. Who's going to be smoking in an... Do you know what I mean? Common sense dictates that. So I didn't know what was going on. And the little joke with the trash can computer, I thought, you know, when I saw that, I thought that was a joke at Apple's expense, because they used to design a Mac Pro that people were sort of joking around and they say, oh, that looked like a trash can. And I thought, okay, maybe that's a dig at Apple. But it actually meant something, because that was a one piece of equipment that they didn't take, you know what I mean? And because they thought it was a trash can, and it also happened to be the one piece of equipment that Shion uploaded her consciousness to, because it mentions, because even when she's there, she asks, is that not a trash can? You know what I mean? So even she's asking about it. So there's these little hints here and there. And even before, when you mentioned the thing where Shion says, well, I can't act without a command, and that sort of leads later on. And there's so many more things. It's like the anime film leads you in such a way, and it makes you think that one thing is going to happen, but at the same time puts other things in to then draw out the story from those smaller plot points, right? Whether it is the trash can, whether it's that line that says, well, I need a command, that kind of stuff. Because I genuinely thought when I saw that she left and went over to the solar farm or the wind farm, that she basically was going to kidnap Toma and kill him. Like, that's, my mind went there straight away, especially when she was on the phone and it was cutting out, and then Toma was like, please come, this and that. So I genuinely thought that she had gone rogue, and I'm presuming Satomi thought the same thing, because she rushed out and went there. And I didn't expect this whole theatrical piece where everyone is singing, and some of them are singing quite badly because that's their characters, but everyone's joining joining in, and that moment where she gets shot, I'll be real with you, I cried at that moment because I'm like, fuck. And then when I saw the runtime and I was like, it's an hour, like there's an hour left of this film. What the hell? Like, what's gonna happen now? Like, they shot her dead. Like, what's gonna happen now in the next half an hour? And then it sort of transitioned from the slice of life movie to romance, then coming of age, and then it ended up being a heist film. You know what I mean? Like The Italian Job, which I thought was quite odd because I didn't expect that to happen all in one movie.
Well, I can tell you probably a big reason as to why it had so many different, I'm going to say the term puzzle pieces here, and you'll kind of see where I'm going with this in a minute, is because, again, me being the nerdy person I am, I had to see who was involved in this story, and the screenplay was actually adapted by Ichiro Kochi, which, if you don't know that name, I'm sorry, but he's basically the creator and still writing Code Geass and a bunch of other very popular anime series. So yeah, and like a lot of his themes and his stories are all about there being multiple little pieces of the same puzzle, and also a lot of swerves. Like, you never can really guess what's gonna happen next.
And it was satisfying, don't get me wrong. Like, if this was a 12 episode anime and then they're like, oh, like in the final episode they reveal everything, I would be really annoyed because I'm like, why would you build it up for this long? And I feel that because it is a film, it worked out to be the way that it is, if that makes sense. Because imagine if this was a 12 episode anime, because I don't think it would ever be a 24 episode anime, but if this was a 12 episode anime, I don't think it would succeed. I don't think it would be good.
I'm probably a little bit opposite here. I'm not saying about if it would succeed or not, but after I watched it, I was imagining, I said, man, this could have been really good as like a season long 10, 12 episode anime, because of the fact that everything wouldn't have felt as rushed. Not saying that it was rushed in a bad way, but they could have actually put out more information, but potentially even more swerves, and built out the story over like 10 episodes. That's what I think it could have made the story grander.
It could have. And I mean, you could have done things like flashback events. You could have gone more into, you know, the childhood trauma side of things. But then, like, would you make it like an Erased, right? Would you go in full on childhood trauma like Erased, or would you make it more like Plastic Memories? And I think that combined with the singing would not work at all. Do you see what I'm saying? If you drew it out to be 10 or 12 episodes, that means you need to put in more singing. And I think, would we be able to handle all of that singing in a 12 episode anime? Because this isn't really necessarily focused around singing, that's just a plot point. Other than stuff like Love Live and K-On!, there aren't many anime that have levels of drama like this does that include singing. Right?
I definitely think it could have worked, and I would have just so. I think that what they would have had is like just had like one song per episode of the anime.
But then that would have been really annoying. Like, I wouldn't want one song per episode, because then it would feel like a Monster of the Week but with music. I don't agree with that.
At the same time, it would have been like, oh, I wonder what the song's gonna be about this week.
You're just proving my point. You've basically turned it into a Monster of the Week show, which I don't think this is.
That's not always a bad thing. Like, it's kind of like the cherry on top if you enjoy the songs.
No, I'm not saying I don't enjoy the songs. I really love the songs, but I think that overdoing it might make the anime, if you'd done it as a 12 episode anime, would make it incredibly tacky. Do you see what I mean? It will feel as though they're using it as a crutch to sort of fill out time. And I never felt within the film that they were filling out time with the music. But if they did adapt it into an anime, I felt as though you're going to get that more sort of High School Musical-esque, filling out time, 5-minute long song that just is out of context or is just bolted on for the sake of it. And I feel that if you did make this into an animated series, it's gonna follow that. It would be very difficult to adapt this into a 12 episode anime, in my opinion.
I don't think so, but I mean, I guess that's where we'll
the only way I could see it working is that if we got to see, so after the point where Shion basically gets her memories and retains them back, if we had, so you know that bit where they actually infiltrate it, if you had a second core, because you know, like, you have your first 6 episodes leading up to this part where they infiltrate the building, right? And then you have the next 3 episodes going through the memories individually as episodes so that you can get more context of the memories. I think that would work work. So you could still have your songs in the same arrangement that it is within the same hour, 2 hours, right? Because that would make up 6 episodes. And then you have the other 6 episodes focusing on the memories, and then you end off with the climax. That would work really well. But to do it as, you know, a weekly song thing might not necessarily work, because there are certain things in which, I'll be honest with you, I wanted to know more about Satomi's childhood. I wanted to know about the relationship that her and Toma had, right? Because they are very interesting characters.
That's what the only thing that I was saying is that, you know, if it had been like, you know, a 10 episode anime versus a movie, they could have spent more time on things like that, you know, and even fleshing out more things with like the labs and the characters there, because like we really didn't see a whole lot about them and what their actual motivations, other than man no like woman. That was really about it. That's all that we got there. So I would have liked to have seen, like I said, just a little bit more fleshed out stuff if it were to ever be adapted into like a movie, because into a animated series. So like we were saying earlier, so the movie's an hour and a half long. If you turn it into a 10 episode show, okay, then you've now just basically just doubled that time. That's all there is.
I completely agree on that point. Like, there's certain things that I really wanted to know. I wanted to know more about Satomi's mother's struggle at work. That would have been interesting to see. I wanted to know like his sort of plot point, and like how is he gonna sabotage, how is it affecting his life, how the parents are as well, because I don't know if you know this, but the main cast, all of their parents work for the company.
It seemed like this Hoshima Labs, they controlled the whole town basically. Like, so all the AI was theirs. The biggest building in this pretty rural area was their whole grandiose dual tower monstrosity in the middle of this, like I said, pretty much rural area. So that was a really big part of it that I would like to have seen them go in just a little bit deeper. But at the same time, do I think it would work better as one versus the other? That's kind of hard to say, but I thought it worked good with what they did do in this hour and a half movie.
It is a one shot, right? So
right.
You can argue that we are looking too much into this, but that's our job here.
I don't think it's a looking too much into it. It's the fact that obviously I think that we both enjoyed the movie, and that's kind of testament that where someone like me who would like to see more, it's because I'm invested in it and because I liked it.
Speaking of investments, right? Characters. What do you think of the characters in the show? Who would you say are your favorite characters? I wouldn't say I have a least favorite character in the show, because what I like about the characters is that everyone gets their own segment for character development through Shion, right? But in terms of my favorite character, I will have to say it's between Thunder and Toma. They're like my joint favorite character.
Just like you, there's no like least favorite character, and I can 100% see people liking pretty much any of these characters. I mean, Toma definitely feels more, and I don't mean this in any kind of derogatory way, but he's kind of like that any man kind of character.
What
like
do you mean?
anyone can, I just mean it as in anyone can look at him and his story, involvement in here, and kind of, I don't want to say sympathize, but also feel a connection with him.
Yeah.
Especially people like us that are kind of nerdy, and people were calling him a nerd, you know, geek, whatever, because he was so into technology. And then people were saying how he was like a genius because he was able to write, you know, AI since he was like 8 years old. But and then at the same time, he was, you know, other than his little group of other geek friends, he was kind of an outsider, and like they would notice how he kept, you know, watching Satomi from a distance because they were childhood friends, and he still clearly was like in love with her and all that kind of stuff. So that's just what I mean. I mean, it's one of those things where he's the type of character that, you know, anyone, especially young people, I think could get behind. As far as and in Thunder's just a good guy all around. He was, you know, a funny character.
You know what I love about Thunder? There was that scene where he's like, Shion, will you go out with me?
Yes, no, I was just getting ready to bring that. I love the fact that he did not care in the slightest. Like, he knew that she was just an AI, but he still liked her.
In a way, that sort of proved that the experiment was a success, because he didn't care that she was an AI. He fell in love with her, and I think the reason why is because of the level of growth that she added to his character. She taught him something, right? And they shared a moment. I mean, when, you know, technically they were dancing. Yes, they were practicing judo, but that was an intimate moment for him. And I don't know, it kind of reminded me, I mean, yes, they are high school students. It kind of reminded me of that student that you have. And we keep on bringing him up. We keep on bringing up this kid. Will Sensei, I want girlfriend. That guy has the same energy as him.
Very, very similar energy, actually.
You know what? It's weird. That was the first thing that came up in my head. As soon as I saw that scene when he was like, will you go out with me? And obviously, Shion doesn't understand it. And she was like, yeah, I would like to go outside. Like she doesn't really understand what he means by that. But like even after when Shion quote unquote dies, he's there and he puts Shion's face on Sandayu.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like
I thought it was cute.
Yeah, it's cute, but I understand like it's not a creepy thing. Like some people are like, oh, that's a bit weird. Like, why would he do that? It's not creepy.
It's for motivation.
Yeah, it's for motivation because he was struggling with coming to terms with himself and struggling with judo. The fact that he never won any tournaments, and I think it's because his approach to judo was wrong. He didn't see of it as like a dance. He didn't see it like that, and Shion had taught him that. So the way that he sees it, and even the fact that he was willing to go out to the electronics company by himself and fuck shit up. He was going to do it by himself, right? And he had all this like baseball bats and things, and it's kind of cute because he's thinking, oh, I can go up against them, even though they're like a multi-billion-dollar company with all this advanced tech, and he's thinking with his little baseball bat and golf clubs that he can go and attack them. But it's cute because it's like he's doing it not because I don't think he's like necessarily attracted to Shion, but I think it's more so because Shion taught him how to be human. And this is really weird because Shion does that with every single one of the characters, right? With Go-chan, for example, he has this sort of complex where he feels inferior to everyone else. He's the popular guy. He's like the most popular guy in school.
You stole my thunder. Like, you just went on this whole big rant after I just said my little piece, and you totally stole my thunder.
I'm sorry, Will. This is just such an exciting anime.
I wanted to get back to Toma before you got on the whole rant here about thunder and everything. We'll touch on Go-chan in a minute. But the thing about Toma, going back to him, is that I think honestly, like, even though if you look at like listings for these characters, it lists him as just being a supporting character, but Toma was really the key of this entire story because he's the one that set off everything from all those years ago. And then Shion herself actually came to the revelation that she was like, because her order, her command was to make Satomi happy, but then she realizes later that the way to make Satomi happy was to make Toma happy by giving Toma the push to finally admit his feelings for Satomi, to finally be honest with her and make that connection again, even if it was just to be friends again. Like I said, so he's the one that kind of set everything off, and in the end he's the one that was pushing everybody. He was the one that came up with all the ideas on like how they could, rescue Shion. He's the one that remembered having the storage unit. He's the one that, like I said, going back to the whole memory thing too, he remembered everything and was able to connect dots that other people couldn't. So like I said, he was really the key in this whole factor.
You've mentioned online that it's stated that he is a supporting character, right? And I think that's listed on purpose, because if you listed Toma as a main character in the film, people can put two and two together and say, well, that's actually Toma's commands, right? Because even the way that Toma is speaking to Shion in the beginning, it's as if he created Shion, but obviously he doesn't know that, right? So part of me thinks that if they had listed Toma as a main character, because he is, for all intents and purposes, Toma is a main character, but if they had listed him as such, then I feel as though
it could have given things away.
It would have given things away pretty quickly.
Now we can go back to talking about Go-chan. Go-chan actually, even though he is a supporting character, he was actually my favorite character in the show, because of the fact that from the onset, like the first kind of idea you get of him is this whole visage that he has of being the cool boy at school. He was just so nonchalant about things, acting like he didn't have a care in the world. But I noticed it too, as soon as like he was even talking with Toma, how he was like, man, you're amazing. He's like, I wish I could do that. Or he's like, I'm a nobody. And then he said the same thing with Thunder. Or like, anytime he discovered things that someone else could do, he was always putting himself down. And like, he just wasn't passionate about anything. And like the whole time he kept thinking that, like Aya, who, they had obviously kind of like been your typical on again, off again, boyfriend, girlfriend thing. I can't remember where it was mentioned at, but basically like he was talking about how he wished that he was looked at for more than just being good looking and athletic, that he wished that he was smart, and that he thought that Aya only basically had him as like a trophy. She looked at him the same way that she looked at like a nice handbag and stuff like that, which obviously we come to find out wasn't true at all. She really did care about him, and that's why like I think it was really neat when Satomi finally gave her the push to be honest with Go-chan, where she was like, look, she was like, I look at you like I do because I care about you. She's like, I can tell when you're sad, I can tell that you're struggling, that you're hurting, and I want to be there for you. And like that just opened his eyes and his heart, and he was like, wow, there is someone that actually truly does care about me and not just what I can do or what I look like. He's an opposite kind of character from me, you know, like I'm not the cool guy, I'm not the suave guy, I wasn't that guy when I was in high school and stuff like that. But at the same time, just knowing what it's like to struggle with self-esteem issues and never feeling like you're measuring up to those around you is very relatable, I think, to, you know, most anybody regardless of age.
It's interesting because every one of these characters has something that they're dealing with, which I find incredibly admirable. And as you mentioned, I mean, with Go-chan, it's very relatable. And I think even with Aya as well, like what she's going through is quite relatable, you know, because it's not easy what she's going through. And I think they've also mentioned, like with Aya, that there's certain things like she feels that she might not have the best relationship with her dad, which I think that would have been interesting to delve in a little bit. Like you only hear about it for like a moment when they steal the dad's key card and they were like, oh, I didn't know my dad's password was my birthday. And I'm like, okay. Like there was more to unpack with Aya, and I think Aya, I was a little bit disappointed with the fact that she could have got a little bit more character development. I think her character development is more so tied with Go-chan in a way, which is a bit unfortunate. I would have liked to have seen more with her because every other character got their own unique sort of story arc or mini sort of story arc with Shion a bit more. Like hers just was kind of like, oh, I'm jealous. And then, do you see what I mean?
She got over it and then she's like, okay, now we're friends.
Yeah.
Now, I will say though, I loved their little moment they had in the little heist scene where they were like the distraction where they were riding the little like
that was pretty cool.
uni scooter, and like they're both just like laughing and smiling even though they're kind of in danger. And like when they zoom in on her face and she's just having the time of her life, like just being with him and doing something with him to help people that they care about. And then even when they're caught, like how she just starts breaking out in the song even though she knows that they've already been made. It brought warmth to her.
Yeah, I would agree. It did bring a level of warmth to her, and I think she's sort of catching on with the whole Shion vibe of like bringing joy to people. Like, do you know what I mean? Like at first she was thinking it's weird that she's just randomly breaking out into song, and then now she's doing the same. She's doing the same, which I thought was pretty cool. Other than that, what did you think of Shion? Because I thought her character was quite interesting. I mean, I would have liked to have seen her when she was younger, just to kind of get a feel of her family situation and what sort of led her to that event, how her and Toma were friends back then, because you really get a small snippet, because I don't know if they were friends from before 3rd grade or if it was just the fact that they were friends during 3rd grade.
They even talked about it. They were like, we were friends up through 3rd grade and then we kind of stopped talking to each other. So they had been like childhood friends, I guess probably since, you know, kindergarten.
Obviously you wouldn't have seen memories from Shion from that era 100%, but it would have been nice to have seen memories either from like, you know, from Toma, or do you see what I'm saying?
It's kind of hinted at though too that they were, like I said, you know, had been friends, not just because they said it, but because that was the whole reason why Toma even made the command on the Tomogachi in the first place, to, you know, make Satomi happy, because he knew what she had been going through with her parents getting divorced and all that stuff, and he just wanted to see her smile.
Satomi as a character is just, I don't know, like she is for all intents and purposes one of the main characters of this film, and I don't know, I really like how she is as a character. There's not much I can describe because she's basically your typical protagonist.
It's hard to expand upon her because she's very much what you see is what you get with her, and with her being the actual vehicle that we are, you know, on this journey with, you know, through the whole thing, it's hard to describe her more than, like you say, being your typical anime protagonist type character. But at the same time, like you immediately from the first minute of her actually like kind of taking action shown that she's a very caring person, because like when she goes in to make breakfast for her and her mom, we talked about earlier about how she realized that her mom was going to be kind of slow going in the morning and wanted to give her something easier to eat, so she had like the rice cooker make the rice, you know, softer so it'd be easier to eat, like just little things like that. And then when she arrives to school and she sees the boys kind of bullying the little garbage can robot, she's like, what are you doing, you know? And then she tries to help it, kind of a thing.
And the fact that she actually went out and helped Torma as well, and she sort of ruined her reputation at school, you know, being known as, well, the tattletale princess, right? Being known as that, she's ruining her reputation for the sake of her childhood friend, and I think that's very admirable. It's very respectable as a character, and I can't say bad things about this character because she's just a fantastic human being. It's really what I can say about it. I mean, we also spoke a lot about Shion through the other characters. I will say this, Shion, and this is one of the reasons I love this film.
Sorry, you asked me earlier what I thought about Shion, and I never even got to get into that.
Oh, okay. Well, you can get into that now, but I'm going to say this one thing because I don't have much to say on Shion, because we kind of went through talking about Shion with the other characters in relation to the other characters. But I will say this, Shion obviously is the reason why this film exists. But at the same time, Shion kind of teaches the characters to be human, which is weird coming from an AI. You don't expect that. And yeah, we kind of seen this sort of trope before, like with Plastic Memories. It's a similar sort of idea that's been used in anime before, but I don't know. I feel as though there's certain media at times that affects my life in a certain way. It makes me teach something, so either gets me out of depression or something like that. Like, you know, like Toradora was like that for me with anime, or a game called Giraffe and Anika was like that for me. And I feel that this film for me really taught me what it means to be human, because you're seeing humanity as a robot, right? You're seeing humanity from the perspective as someone who isn't human, who's trying to become human, and you can emulate that in your own life. Like I was saying to Jordan yesterday, I know I keep on referring Jordan, but it's because we recorded yesterday. So I said to him that what stops us as human beings to be more like Shion? It might be weird, and there might be that initial like, why would you just start singing randomly? Like, people will think you're crazy. But we saw that Shion was just so nice as a robot, as a classmate, that people thought she was incredibly, like, people made her popular, and she didn't even care about the popularity. All she cared about was making Satomi happy, right? So how come in our lives we don't have that goal, right? And this is why I'm saying we can learn a lot from Shion here. How come we don't have that goal to make others around us happy, right? Whether it's our close friends, our family, or just a random person on the street, like wave and say hello to your neighbors once in a while, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. And it's interesting because even towards the end, when they were talking about uploading her to the internet and stuff like that, and the idea that there'll be a world full of Shions, and I can't remember, it was Thunder that said it. Thunder was like, you know what, that would be great. A world full of Shions would be great. And it's true. A world full of Shions would be great. And I think we all need to learn something from Shion and kind of, you know, be more happy.
Well, like you brought up about how you think like Shion was teaching us to be human. I don't think that's the right word in this. It's not about being human. It's about being vulnerable. It's about being open and honest, because that's what it all came down to.
Is that not what it means to be human? There's a level of honesty. There's a level of, you know, putting yourself out there, vulnerability, because that's what makes us uniquely human, right? Like if you think about it, computers don't feel vulnerable. Computers don't feel like embarrassed.
That's what I'm getting at here, is that because the fact that she wasn't worried about embarrassing herself and everything, she was just, you know, saying, hey, this is me, putting herself out.
Yeah, but that's
there,
what I'm saying.
that's...
We all need to be like that. That's what I meant by teaching us to be human. I'm not saying she's teaching the characters to be like that, because it wasn't for the characters' benefit. You know, Shion's actions, yes, it was for the characters' benefit, but Shion's demeanor wasn't for the characters' benefit. They're not going to look at Shion and say, well, you know what, I'm going to be more like her. I mean, it's more so for us as the viewer. We look at Shion and we say, well, you know what prevents me from being like that? Well, that's what I mean by she's teaching us, the listeners. She's giving us an example on what I think, you know, a perfect world humanity would be, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Like I said, I think it boils down to, you know, honesty, openness, and letting ourselves be vulnerable. That's what it is. If you want to say that's, you know, teaching us to be human, then so be study it, but that's what I took from her, like, as a character. Plus, I just, going back to what I thought of her as a character, just straight up, she's adorable. I loved her. I don't know how to describe it without just saying her cute mouth and smile.
Okay.
Just the way that she looked, just from a visual aspect.
I know what you mean, but it's incredibly difficult to sort of portray that with words. But I do know what you mean.
No, it is. She's just very bright.
Yeah.
I guess would be the word. That's the long and short of it.
Going on to that, we didn't really speak about the audio-visual component, and this is something I really want to spend a little bit of time on. So we'll speak about the art style and animation first. I will say something here. It feels as though a lot of anime films in this modern era look exactly the same. I don't know if that's a trend.
I was thinking the exact same thing about the only one that, I will say, from this genre style of anime films, the only one of recent years, which really it's not all that recent now, that I thought had its own distinct look was A Silent Voice.
Okay, yeah.
But I mean, that was, Kyoto Animation, which, like I said, you can't really compare them to anyone else, in my opinion. It's interesting
because A Silent Voice did give me that sort of K-On! Vibe because it is Kyoto Animation. But I know what you mean, because when I saw this film, I was like, in a way, it kind of does remind me of the other more recent anime films, like,
Weathering with You, Your Name. Yeah, that the style of these characters and just the I don't want to say the detail, but the design of the actual landscape, the world, the buildings, the buses, everything really, it felt just like one of those movies. And I don't mean that in a bad way.
It's not a bad
but
thing.
It's like you said, they all kind of look very similar.
Yeah.
But I will say, going along with that, everything I thought looked great in this movie. I would have loved to have been able to have seen this on the big screen. I kind of regret not having that opportunity, because just something about being able to see beautiful visuals on a big screen like that just really emphasizes them. And I think that, for this being a JC staff production, it does show that they still kind of have it in a way, because they've kind of gotten a lot of grief lately from, when they took over production of One Punch Man. I'm like, okay, you got to understand, they're not the same type of studio that Bones was, or with their newer seasons of Date Alive, they weren't quite up to par with what most fans were wanting.
It's possibly because of the fact that JC staff has sort of built themselves a reputation with the certain genres of anime that they tend to go for. So it might be a bit of a shock for people, like you said, with fans of One Punch, going from One Punch, which was, Studio Bones, and going into this, or even, other stuff that JC staff has done, like Toradora, Golden Time. It's, it's apples and oranges at that point.
They definitely show that they can still do popular, because I mean, I don't know if you watch it or not, but that they do, Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon, which that show every season has looked great so far.
But for me, with Danmachi, I always kind of felt as though it wasn't the best work from JC, because with JC, a lot of their stuff sort of focuses on cutesy, you know what I mean, right? That sort of fun, vibrant, shoujo anime. And I think Danmachi is it's not always the most vibrant, but we're not talking about Danmachi here. We're talking about this show. And I think it kind of does lack a certain je ne sais quoi when you're looking at animation very closely, because there are times where frames just those derpy faces that you get in anime sometimes.
I'll say the only thing that I really noticed as a knock on this is there were scenes where some characters were talking, and you could see people in the background, but they were just static. It was they drew them in that one pose and just left them there. I mostly noticed it when they were talking in the bus or in the hallway of the school. So, but at the same time, you're not supposed to be focusing on that. I'm just the type of person that does.
That's interesting, because I think Kevin mentioned that in Oremo. That was an issue with Oremo, that they were just static and they would reuse it. So it's stuff like that. I imagine probably because it is a film, they don't want you to focus on the background characters, but even then, the backgrounds themselves are really well drawn and beautifully animated, even if you're looking at landscapes, or that scene with all the fireworks and the lights. That in itself, I would say, I don't think I've seen animation as beautifully made as that in my life, which it goes to say, because I know for a fact that wasn't hand drawn. Like, that wasn't done on a computer, that wasn't done on a tablet. There was some parts that were 3D animated, but when I looked at it...
Are you talking about the part with the first scene with like the fireworks stuff, or are you talking about when they were in the labs?
Actually, I was talking about the first bit. You know, the first bit
Okay.
with the fireworks, and then the bit where they're having the song accompanying that bit in particular, because you're not noticing it as much. Like, all of the fireworks and stuff like that, they wouldn't have been able to do that like traditional animation style. That would have been 3D animated. But I like saying this a lot on Kunai. Good 3D animation is 3D animation that you don't notice, if that makes sense. So, like, for example, if you're looking at Overlord with, you know, when Momonga summons those undead
Oh my
army,
god.
and it's the shittest animation, right? Because you can notice it's like bad 3D because they're skeletons. Momonga's also a skeleton, yet he's not in 3D. But you could tell with this show that you don't see that.
That was such a meme.
That's what I'm saying. It's a meme, but it's like with this film, you don't notice it, and it adds to it. The one thing I will say is that you mentioned that scene with the robots dancing as well. I did notice a 3D animation there, and I was like, I couldn't knock the film solely based on that, but it was just like a bit disappointing, especially after seeing what great work they did with the 3D animation for the fireworks scene. And then it's like, oh, the robots dancing. It's pretty obvious that they didn't get the lighting correct on that.
Now, I'll say, like, going on with that, I love the whole ending sequence, and, like, you know, with the message written in the lights, all the lights, like how it kind of like you goes like up the towers of the buildings, and then all the lights coming on in the town around it, just everything going off, and you know, then the big, you know, light energy beam coming from the satellite dish up into the sky. I thought that whole sequence was just beautiful.
You know, one thing that I will mention is that you said initially that it's sort of Disney-esque, right, with the music and things like that, and
it reaches that crescendo.
Yeah, and it's weird because I will say this, people listening don't hate me for this, but my favorite Disney film, Will, you might be thinking, why is he talking about this? My favorite Disney film is Beauty and the Beast. That's my favorite Disney film.
Nothing wrong with that. Great film.
It's a great film, but it's like, why are you talking about this on an anime podcast? I really saw a lot of similarities between this and Beauty and the Beast, if that makes sense. And do you know where it was? It was like when the robots were dancing, like the trash cans and stuff like that. It felt very... There was a...
Oh,
you know what I'm talking
yeah.
about? There's a song... Lumiere sings in Beauty and the Beast.
No,
not that one. When he was talking about being human again. There's a song about that, and then there's all of these inanimate objects, teacups and like feather dusters and like the curtains and the piano were just like dancing, and it was just like, it reminded me of that. And even those scenes where they go back to that film that Satomi was watching as a child, even when you look at the ballroom dresses and the way that the princes are dressed, and I'm like, is this were they inspired by Beauty and the Beast? Because it felt like clearly
the movie that Satomi has, you know, been infatuated with since she was a child was a Disney movie.
100%.
That's
100%.
There's such strong influences in this whole movie, you know.
Which, I mean, it's another thing because it also grounds the film in reality, because a lot of people love Disney
can relate
films.
to it.
Exactly. There's a lot of kids that would have watched Disney films growing up, and you know that they still do love Disney to this day. And you know, there are people that are fanatics in the same way that there are, you know, I'm gonna call them Disney otaku for a lack of a better term. You know what I mean? Like, they are big fans of Disney in the same way that, you know, we have big fans of anime and big fans of cars and all sorts. So it's incredibly interesting to see that, and I related to that a lot because, fun fact, Will, don't know if you know this, but I mentioned Beauty and the Beast, but I was one of those kids that I did have a favorite Disney film and I'd watch it constantly. And this is back in the day where you had VHS tapes. I'd watch Beauty and the Beast constant just because it was such a good film.
It really is. I mean, there's a reason it was nominated for an Oscar, not just for animation, but, you know, for Best Picture. Good stuff.
It is good stuff, and I was really like impressed by that. Are there anything else that you have to say about the animation?
No, I think we've pretty much touched on it all. I won't say it's like 10/10 animation, but I would definitely still give it, high marks across the board.
It's not like you're expecting it to be 10 out of 10 animation, because it's not something that you're going to be watching week to week. In most cases, you're going to watch it 1 or 2 times and then move on.
For JC staff, I think it looks really dang good.
Agreed. Speaking of really damn good, see that segue? I was proud of it. What do you think of the voice acting? I will say this. Normally on Kunai, we either say, okay, watch the anime dub or sub. And the person suggesting the anime would make that clear which one we need to watch. I asked Will, we need to watch both sub and dub. And Will, do you know the reason I asked you?
No, please
Because
do tell
I
me.
wanted to know your opinion. What do you prefer in this context, the sub or the dub? And I'm not here to put you on spot here, and I'm not going to judge you, but I'm really intrigued to know.
Most people that know me, know that I'm like one of those guys. I'm like 90% sub, 10% dub. I'm not a dub guy. Of course, I cut my teeth on dubs when I was a kid, but it depends on the anime. I will say overall, just because of the Japanese centric, not just location, but kind of characterizations, things like that. Overall, I'm still going to say that I would like the sub more. I thought the voices were like perfect with the characters. Now that being said, I did watch the sub before I watched the dub because I wanted to have it to do a basis of against the dub with. But let's say it's one of those things, if someone was like, hey, do you want to watch a movie with me? Oh, sure. What do you want to watch? I want to watch this movie, sing a bit of harmony. I'd be like, oh, cool. And then if they put it on the dub, be perfectly fine watching it. I thought that the dub cast did great. I will say that I actually like very much Golchan and Toma both in the dub. As far as the voices went, I actually liked the dub singing voice with Shion more than the sub.
This is where I come in, because for me, I agree with you. Like, I'm normally 90% sub, 10% dub, and it's usually on a case-by-case basis. Like, everyone knows my feelings on certain dubs. Like, I'm a big fan of like Panty and Stocking, it's dub, and like Black Lagoon. Like, I feel that those shows are just far better suited for the dub than the sub, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm totally down on the Black Lagoon dub. Now, I'm one of those people, I've watched it both ways, and I love the Japanese too, but it's just, there's something just so much more punchy.
This film is very Japan-centric, but at the same time, I don't feel as though it is Japan-centric, if that makes sense, because in a way you could have set this in America and it still would have worked, because there are those sort of towns in which it's basically comprising of a particular company and its workers and their children, right? That's, you kind of get those in like quite rural parts of the US, so I could see that working there, but that's not the point. My point is, the reason why I'm leaning towards the dub rather than the sub, both of them are great, and you've got great voice actors. You've got like really huge voice actors in the Japanese dub compared to the English dub. The reason why I'm leaning toward the English dub is because of the music.
I'll give that, honestly, I loved the music in both versions, but like I said, that kind of goes along with where I said I loved the English voice for Shion singing. Just something like I was actually able to get more into the music with the dub, because I wasn't having to worry about just reading the lyrics. I was actually able to understand it, so I got more that way.
It's very interesting because you're mentioning about understanding it, and it's not that these songs are just like, like that you have your opening and your endings, and you're not really going to relate to them because you don't understand the meaning behind the music, right? But because of the tempo and because the musics are like ballads, they're telling a story, right? In the same way as you've got your Beauty and the Beast, all of the songs there are ballads and they're telling stories, right? So it makes more sense to listen to it in your own language language, right? Because you can relate to it, you can understand what it's saying, and it makes scenes more emotional because there's a lot of storytelling in this film that is not being told through dialogue, and it's not being told through animation. It's being told through song, and that's incredibly unique, and that's incredibly interesting. And I will say bravo, Megan Shipman.
I was just getting ready to ask you. So did Megan Shipman actually do the singing part as well? Because
she did.
Okay, because yeah, she knocked it out of the park as far as I'm concerned.
I confirmed with Jordan on our recording. They basically, there was someone at Funimation, I can't remember the name, but it was, if you guys want to know who translated it over to English and who sort of adapted it for English, check out the previous episode that we did, because Jordan talks about all their names. My apologies for not remembering. But Jordan was mentioning that there is someone at Funimation that basically they're there to localize the song and actually make it fit within the tune and actually make it sound like a real song and not just like a translation. And then, yeah, it is Megan singing. In the same way that even the other parts where they're singing together, that's all the other voice actors singing. You know, where they're singing terribly, right? When you have Toma, it's all of them. The whole cast is singing.
I would say in their mismatched voices in that particular scene, I actually think had a little bit more reality to it compared to the Japanese. Because that's the whole thing is that a lot of Japanese voice actors and actresses are actually also singers. So I noticed even in the part in the Japanese where Toma was getting the lyrics wrong and supposed to be singing bad, he still didn't sound that awful. But then when you got to Jordan, I don't know if he actually can sing or not, but he was able to portray him basically messing up the song a whole lot better, I felt.
And I think that's down to the direction. I mean, Caitlin Glass, I didn't know this until Jordan told me yesterday, but Caitlin Glass is the ADR director for this film, and I was completely shocked. And I'd imagine that would be part of, her directing, to say, you gotta sing this song like shit. You know what I mean? Because it does add that level to reality that you don't get in the Japanese voiceover, it's incredible the length they went to actually get this done. I will say this, the way that they recorded this was because it's COVID, right? So imagine having to dub over a film during COVID in the United States. It's incredibly difficult, right? They had to come in and they were recording in isolation. So they went into the studio, they did their bits, and they went out. So they didn't get to see the other people. The other people weren't in front of them and they weren't playing off them, if that makes sense. So that was incredibly difficult to do by itself. But then you've got actors such as the voice actor for Satomi, Risa May. She's based in California. So imagine she wasn't in Texas when everyone else was in Texas recording this. She was based in California. So there would have been some level of long distance recordings and things like that. And that's incredibly complex. And I think us as anime fans in general, we tend to forget the amount of work that goes into a localization and a dub, especially a dub that is as good as this one. Even Thunder, Cayman Casey as Thunder, man, I felt that Thunder's voice in English was far better in Japanese, because you kind of felt Thunder's love, if that makes sense, right? You felt his emotions a lot more. And I don't know, it just works really well. And especially because you're also having to match the voices to the lip flaps, when they're talking, which is incredibly difficult to do when they're talking. But imagine having to match that with singing. It's just incredible, and it blows my mind. And I'm just genuinely really impressed with the whole voice cast. And a lot of the actors are quite new, or they've done roles that were really major roles in anime or films. Some of them would be doing supporting roles or additional voices and things like that. But I think even for Jordan, this was to date, this is the biggest project that he's worked on. And I think it's the same for a lot of the voice cast.
He was, I think, if you're gonna do an English dub, I thought he was perfect for Toma.
No, 100% he is. And to be honest with you, all the other voices, I can't see them any other way. Even Shion's voice, the voice matched the energy that Shion has, right? And just the joy that Shion brings.
This is one of my personal, kind of, I guess you say, bias against dubs that's so many times to me, because I almost always watch the sub before I watch the dub, because, you know, until recent years, of course, when they started doing simul dubs and all that type of stuff, I always had the opportunity to watch a subtitled show before the dub ever even came out, or like if the dub did come out, by the time that, you know, episode 1 would come out in English, there would already be 6, 7, 8 episodes out in Japanese. So that's what I was going with, because I didn't want to wait. So I will say that this is definitely not that case at all, where all the voices I felt matched the characters very, very well. Going back talking about Kate and Glass, like how we were talking just briefly before we started to actually record about how, like, you know, I told you I've been down with her for a long time for as a voice actress and as working, you know, in ADR and things like that. Like, I'm that nerdy guy that I always want to know who's involved behind the scenes, who's writing scripts, who's writing the screenplays, who is producing, things like that. So, you know, and I went into this completely blind. I'm like, I don't want to be spoiled by anything. Since you brought this up to me, I'm like, let me just go in, let me watch it, let me get my honest and true opinions. Don't let me see like any names here or anything that might influence one thing or the other. So let me just enjoy it, take my notes, and then I'll go in and see who did what. And when I saw her name pop up, I'm like, well, that's why it sounds good.
100%. And I mean, like, it's really rare sometimes that you get such a coordinated production like this, because you know, you kind of expect it from the Japanese voiceovers, right? Because there's a standard in Japan. I think the Japanese audience expects the voice actors to perform a certain way, because a lot of them are considered celebrities, right? Like, you wouldn't say the same thing about voice actors in the Western world. Yes, there are some, they're like mega celebrities now, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna name names, but you know what I'm talking about.
I would say, like, if you want to put it in like Japanology, lots of voice actors and voice actresses are almost on the same level as like idols.
Yeah,
in Japan.
100%. Like, there's such a industry focus on seiyus, and sometimes I think that there's certain projects that might not be the best, but because they've got a certain seiyu, it's gonna sell, you know what I mean? Or, you know what I mean, like, there's certain things that aren't necessarily as popular, but because they've got a particular voice actor, it's gonna sell well. When I think in the West, it doesn't matter as much as long as the voices are good, you know? I'll be honest with you, I didn't know anyone on this list. I mean, yes, I do know of Caitlin from her previous works, but when I got the press release, the only name I realized was Jordan, and that was it.
For me, after looking into it, the only names that I kind of really knew were Caitlin and then Ian Sinclair, because he's been around for as long as I can remember in English dubbing as well. Like, he's actually not too much younger than myself.
It's just fantastic. The voiceover, the music as well. I mean, we can't talk about this show without talking about the music, and it is incredible. It's incredible, and I will say this. I don't know, Will, if you agree with me, but if they released the songs as an album, I would be listening to it quite a bit.
I actually have, you know, some anime music CDs,
okay,
things like that. So, you know, I would definitely sing along with some of these songs. So, yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that.
And to be honest with you, I'm going to go out there and say it. I prefer the English songs over the Japanese. And I wouldn't be listening to the Japanese songs as much. But if Funimation, please steal this idea, because I know you can do it. If you guys could release it on Spotify, like, just isolate the songs, release it on Spotify, or when you release the Blu-ray, like, put in like a special disc that has all the songs on there.
I mean, honestly, that would be like the perfect like pack-in of, you know, a Blu-ray DVD.
I would love that.
That would
100%.
be to have the music. Yeah, well, like, sometimes you even get that with, you know, anime here in Japan. You know, like, actually, anime music is kind of I don't want to say it's like a big deal, but almost any even moderately popular anime that will release, you know, some of the songs on CDs and stuff. Like, you know me, I love New Game. I've got the New Game CDs, you know, and even though it's these cute girl songs, I'm sitting there singing along with them, you know. Or like there was an anime a few years ago called Anne Happy that I just absolutely love the OP. I sing right along with it.
Like I said, there's nothing wrong with that, and especially if the music is good, why not? Like, you know what I mean? Other than that, I think there's not much else to say, because I did mention, you know, the certain things I didn't like throughout the episode. And in terms of overall opinion, well, who would you recommend this film to, and would you recommend it to others?
I mean, I would definitely recommend it to others. I think it just really depends on who you talk to. Now, you know as well as I do that, just in my personal opinion, that it seems to me like, as far as Western anime fans go, a lot of them are really still kind of, without sounding demeaning about it, stuck in that whole shonen battle
I agree with you.
type stuff. I wouldn't recommend it to someone like that, but if it's someone that that watches different types of anime, people that are into, just fun kind of adventure shows, or people are into music shows like a K-On, something like that, anyone like that, definitely recommend this too.
For me, it's interesting that you mentioned the fact that, you wouldn't recommend it to big shonen fans and, that kind of stuff. And I agree with you, because it's very difficult to go, like, I've met a lot of people recently, especially through work, and speaking to them and asking, hey, what kind of anime are you into? And they're like, yeah, I'm into Dragon Ball, I'm into Demon Slayer, I'm into all this kind of stuff. And then as soon as you tell them what anime you're into, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not into, that kind of romance, that kind of slice of life genre.
Yeah.
And I think, yes, it's the Western anime community is sort of leaning more so towards shonen, just because a lot of people grew up on shonen, if that makes sense. But I will suggest this show, but not to anime fans at all, actually. If you're new to anime, give this show a try. If you're someone that, goes out to the cinema a lot and wants to watch random things, or if you've got one of those unlimited cinema passes, I don't know if that's a thing in the US, but we have them in the UK. If you're paying for an unlimited cinema pass, go and watch this film. You're going to enjoy it, even though it's anime. And I know there's a lot of stigma against anime, and some people are like, ugh, anime. But don't think of it as anime.
Let's put it this way. I'm not saying I'm trying to compare this to a Ghibli movie, but how many people back in the day went to watch Ghibli movies in the theater, not even realizing they were watching anime? It's kind of like that.
I think the reason being is because back in the day, those Studio Ghibli films were distributed by Disney. Obviously, Disney's behind it. They're putting their money behind it. They're sort of lobbying for like Oscar nominations and that kind of stuff. And they pretty much drove the hype of films like the Studio Ghibli films. And it sort of created its own cult following, that there are people that I know, right, that have seen Studio Ghibli films before watching, animated series. Like when we did that interview with TFL, when I was speaking to Anthony, he mentioned he got started from Studio Ghibli films. It was just mainly watching anime films. And I think if you are someone that wants to get into anime films are a good way to get into it. I think this film, if you're watching it, especially if you're watching it dubbed, it's very accessible. It's very accessible, very relatable. I think every one of us can relate to this film, even if we're not anime fans.
Just piggybacking on to, what you're saying here, is like, I wouldn't even say, don't even just be like, oh, it's an anime film. It's an animated feature film.
Yeah. And I think that's how it should be portrayed. I mean, a lot of the time when we say anime film, I think people sort of get the idea of like, Mugen Train, for example, or, like the Dragon Ball films, because those are films that are linked to an animated series. And, they aren't the most accessible because you would need to have seen the series first before watching the film in most cases. But this is a film that you can go into the cinema, watch it, and be done with it. That's the beauty of it. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've done this sort of pilot on Kunai today, is because we've noticed, and I think with Kunai, we started off being new to anime, at least when we started, when it was me and Kevin and Tyson and stuff. When we started, we were all very, very new to anime, and the idea behind Kunai was that we were getting into anime. And I think a lot of the anime choices and a lot of the anime that we're watching now, I've noticed that they're not always the most accessible. And the easiest way into anime, the most accessible way into anime for newcomers and people that aren't necessarily otaku, or people that don't play Japanese games that will lead them into anime, is by watching anime or animated feature films like this one, like Your Name, like A Silent Voice, like any of the Ghibli films. Like, do you see what I mean? So that's really why we done this on Kunai, and I would recommend this to everyone. I would think that if I showed this to my mum, she would enjoy it. So it's kind of like that thing where, imagine if you went into a pub, right? And you showed the people at the pub this film. Would they enjoy it, or would they think it's weird? And I think they'd enjoy it, but let's not talk about the pub. If you went and you brought it to your mum, we'll call this the mum test. If you went and you brought this anime to your mum, would your mum understand it? Would your mum enjoy it? And I think this passes the mum test. My mum would love this anime, I think, and I think she would enjoy it as well.
I know my mom would, because she loves stuff like, like your Disney movies and like Frozen, stuff like that.
So yeah, it does pass the mum test. So I don't know if this is a thing that we're going to continue with the animated feature films and stuff for Kunai.
Does it pass the mum test?
Does it pass the mum test? And if it does, it's a great film. And I think this does. This does pass the mum test. But that being said, Will, thank you for coming on this pilot for Kunai. You know what? I'm glad you enjoyed this film 100% because I loved it as well. I genuinely did. And I think this is one of the best films to do for this new Kunai pilot. So thank you, Will, for coming on.
Well, you're very welcome. And like someone that's as picky as me, that if I liked it, that should bode well for it. Not saying that I have super elitist taste
well, it's
or
not
anything
necessarily
like that.
I think you've been in the anime community for such a long time. You've seen great shows, but equally you've seen some really dog shit shows as well. And
I mean, and I'm the first to admit that some of those dog shit shows I really like, but at the same time, I can admit that they're dog shit.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, because you've been around for so long, you've seen how the community has grown. So it's like, I think people really do respect your opinions because you've been around for so long and you've seen how the community has changed. You've interacted with the community, and it's a very valuable asset and a very valuable talent to have. But yeah, thank you, Will, for coming on, and big thanks to our sponsors, Japan Crate, Crunchyroll. In addition to that, big thanks to Sony Pictures Entertainment, as well as Funimation UK and Funimation US, as well as all the voice actors that we've managed to get speaking to and actually getting to know more about how this film was made. If you do want to check this episode out, you can do. It might be one of the previous episodes where we had Jordan Dash Cruz on talking about his role and just the sort of day-to-day of how this film was dubbed and that process behind that, because it's always nice to learn more about the anime industry, what goes on behind the scenes. And by the time this Kunai episode comes out, this would have already exited theaters. And the reason why we did that was because, yes, we do talk about spoilers on Kunai, but we felt that we wanted to give you guys an opportunity to watch the film first before we give our opinions on the film and things like that. So we wanted to give you guys time to watch it and then time to join in the discussion with us. So I don't know whether or not this film will make its way to Funimation through the streaming service, but I will assure you, by the time you're listening to this, Blu-rays would have come out. So go and support this show. Buy yourself a Blu-ray. Maybe buy yourself 2, maybe buy yourself 5 Blu-rays, because I think this is a film to keep and to watch and to sort of cherish for years to come. And yeah, that being said, bye!
So long.